Hello and welcome to Unprofessional Engineering. My name is James.
And you got Luke.
Luke, today we're starting up a new series, I think.
I think this is a new series. I'm excited about it.
Yeah, I don't know if I am or not. So we have our great inventors or inventors we love, but what we're going to be doing today is amazing architects. And to start off, we're going to be looking at Frank Lloyd Wright.
So for those of you listening to the podcast, sorry, I have my Frank Lloyd Wright book.
Yeah, you do.
I'm a huge Frank Lloyd Wright fan.
I'm putting this out there right now, right from the start, that I just don't get it.
Whoa, what do you mean you don't get it?
I don't get art. I don't get weird-looking houses. I don't get weird-looking buildings, and I'm glad you're a Frankie fan because he kind of seems like the worst to me.
From
a terrible person and awful designer.
That I disagree with, but as a person, he was pretty terrible.
Super bad person. So let's talk about his childhood a little bit. What do you think?
So first of all, he was born in Richland Center, Wisconsin.
Love cheese.
I love cheese. On June 8th. My birthday's June 9th.
Ouch. I forgot it last year.
I know you did.
Sorry.
In 1867, he's the son of William Carey Wright. Willie. He was a preacher and a musician, and his mother's name was Anna Lloyd Jones, no relation to Frank Lloyd, Andrew Lloyd Webber.
Wow.
I'm not sure where I was going with that. She was a teacher. But basically, his childhood, it was nomadic. So they were...
It was like an army brat almost, but without the army.
Exactly. So they were... What nationality were they? They were... why can't I remember what they were? Dutch? No, I can't remember what they were.
Okay.
Regardless,
Thank you.
they traveled a ton because his dad was a preacher, so he would basically do missionary work all over the United States whenever he was a young kid.
I saw he was a preacher and a part-time lawyer. And I was like, how is that a thing? Or a part-time attorney? But anyways, continue.
Yeah,
Sorry.
so he traveled a ton as a young child, and then finally they end up settling in Wisconsin.
After leaving.
Yeah, after leaving, in a place called the Valley is the only thing that it was named, and that's where. And it wasn't just him and his parents; it was an extended family. It's kind of like a commune.
Like a commune,
yeah.
Nothing said that, but just from how they were living and then how his career started, it kind of felt that way.
Yeah.
Did you see that his mother kind of inspired a lot of this building design stuff because she went to, the Centennial Exhibition in Philadelphia, represent Pennsylvania.
Nice.
So when they were in this area, where she saw an exhibit for educational blocks known as Froebel gifts. And this was kind of like the foundation of some sort of innovation kindergarten curriculum that Frederick Wilhelm August Froebel created. So this is some whole thing that apparently happened. But she bought a set for young Frankie, and he spent a bunch of his time playing with this. So it was a bunch of blocks with geometrical shapes that could be assembled in a whole bunch of combinations. So instead of just like stacking blocks like I would do, maybe one would be a square, one's a rectangle, have some spheres and things like that. So he was always building in his mind with these kind of weird little blocks.
He was Welsh.
He was Welsh.
He was from Wales.
Welsh.
I think
He's from Wales. Isn't that like the little piece of England?
I think so.
That little side piece, yeah. Did you also see kind of a fun fact? Much like Marie Curie, his name too is a lie. He was born Frank Lincoln Wright.
I did not see that.
Yeah.
How did I miss that?
Dirty lie. How about that?
What?
So, pseudo fun fact? Do you want a pseudo fun fact?
Yeah, lay it down.
Having to do with that. When Frankie turned 14, his parents separated.
Yep.
So that's not fun. Anna had become unhappy for some time with Billy's inability to provide for the family, which makes sense.
Yeah.
So she was like, how about you leave? And so, of course, the divorce was finalized in 1885 when William sued Anna for, quote, lack of physical affection. Is that something you can do?
That?
You can sue people for that?
Lack of physical affection?
Maybe in 1885 you could. So anyways, how does this fun fact play into anything other than saying you can do that? Well, it's around that time that Frank changed his name from Lincoln to Lloyd in honor of his mom's family.
Oh.
Yeah, so
nice.
That was interesting. Do you have anything else as a child? Because I'm moving right into college.
So, I was going to say college. I don't have any other child
Oh,
stuff.
go ahead.
I'm good
then.
with college.
That would be a
so
no. But go
to
ahead.
actually support his family, interesting. So there is an engineering connection here.
There is, absolutely there is.
So
the worst kind.
Yeah.
but-
So when he was 18 years old, to help support the family, he actually worked for the dean at the University of Wisconsin's Department of Engineering while he was going to school there.
Big Ten school.
Yeah.
University of Wisconsin.
I'm guessing he didn't play
Badgers.
I'm guessing he didn't play football.
Nah, probably not.
Yeah.
Did you see that he was brought in as a, quote, special student?
No.
I wonder if that had to do with him working for the dean or what. I don't know what qualifies as a special student, but that's what he was.
Okay.
Did you see he was going for civil engineering?
I did.
Worst.
I'm so glad he changed it.
Did he change? I thought he just dropped out. That's what I saw. That is a change.
Well, he dropped out and then moved to Chicago.
Oh, okay. So, yeah, he dropped out of there, and like all great people that we talk about, you know, he never finished that civil engineering degree.
Mm-hmm.
Fun fact, he was given an honorary doctorate of fine arts from Wisconsin in 1955.
He probably deserves it.
Whatever happened to our push for getting an honorary PhD somewhere?
I don't know.
I don't know. If our people in Tennessee still listen, write in and let us know if you can give us one of those.
Okay.
All right.
Was it
Continue
specifically Tennessee we were
on.
getting it
I
from?
remember we had a school there that was
Okay.
listening.
So in 1887, he traveled to Chicago where he found work with two different firms before being hired by the prestigious partnership of Adler and Sullivan. So apparently this was a really big architectural firm in Chicago. And he actually must have impressed somebody because for 6 years he worked directly for Louis Sullivan, one of the primary partners.
So, did you see why he was able to find work like this? It's because of the fortunate event known as the Great Chicago Fire.
Yeah.
So, with so much destruction from that, there was all sorts of new building going on in that time frame. So, yeah, he could hop on in there. Do you have any more information about all that? Like, as he was getting married when he was working there?
Yeah, so this makes me feel bad a little bit about myself because you always think people back in these days had like no money and it was really difficult to do things. At age 22, which is crazy, Frank Lloyd Wright married his sweetheart, Catherine Lee Tobin. Kitty, as they like to call her, back in 1889. And he convinces his boss, he says, you know what, give me a loan for, I forget
His
what the
boss
amount
gave him
was.
a 5-year contract to like be like, you're stable for this marriage.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah, and gives him this loan so he can build this house. So at 22, he convinces a partner at a major architectural firm in Chicago to give him a loan
Right?
for a house.
like as a wedding present sort of.
Like, what is
That's
that?
crazy.
So basically, he finds this this lot in a suburb of Chicago called Oak Park, and this is where he builds his first house, and it's still there today. The Frank Lloyd Wright House. That's the name of it. It's
Is it a museum?
I think it can be
would assume.
toured. Yeah, I think it can be toured. And it's a pretty modest house. It actually is more of like a cottage, but I'm watching this documentary about it, and until you like have like an architect describe to you the differences between like a traditional cottage and like what he did, like when you look at it, it almost looks upside down. Like the house looks heavy up top because it has this big, huge A-frame and then really wide pillars with windows underneath it. It was just interesting how...
Interesting's the wrong word. Stupid is the right word.
I love his architecture.
So absurd.
Absolutely
So did you
love it.
see that? So he originally got hired at that firm, and he decided the $8 a week that he was making wasn't enough money. So he's like, "Peace, I'm out of here, boys." And he went to the designers as a designer for Beers, Clay, and Dutton, and he was all like, "Man, this is a lot of work. I don't want to do this. I can't go doing building design by myself." And he quit and went back to that original guy for more pay.
And
He boomeranged him.
and I was a boomerang once.
Were you? Oh yeah, you were.
Twice,
yeah.
actually. So interesting. So he started. So after he builds his house in Oak Park, he starts getting a ton of interest from neighbors, and they're like, "This is a pretty amazing house. Would you hook me up and make my house?" So as a side business, the whole time he's working for Sullivan, he's making these houses for like commissioned directly to him. He didn't take them to Sullivan because Sullivan was more like a big architectural firm, not like residential houses.
Right.
So he does this for years. Finally, he catches wind of whoa, what are you doing? And it's not clear whether he was fired or he quit, but that's the point where he actually completely went out on his own and started his practice of only doing. And he does primarily residences. He has a lot of business spaces, but primarily residences. But that's kind of how that all started when he got kicked out of Sullivan.
I want to talk about that a little bit more, but first let's take a break for a word from our sponsor.
I'm guessing it's the Frank Lloyd Wright Foundation?
I did see a lot of stuff like flwright.org and things like that were very interesting.
Yeah.
There's a lot out there. But no, in fact, we do not have a sponsor this episode. It is. But we do have a shout out. Sean B. recently wrote in, not only on the Facebooks, which was nice, but also an email. He's an electrical engineer, which I won't hold against him, in Seattle with just a ton of episode ideas. He wrote in with like 8 or 10 episode ideas.
Are they all electrical related?
No, they weren't. Some of them were, so we won't do those ones. Just kidding, we might. But they were actually pretty good. So when we're coming up with our next episodes,
Be sure to give him some credit.
But I did want to give this one a shout out to my friend Jimbo, who texted in with this suggestion. So he kind of said, maybe you should do an episode on how art influences architecture or something like that. And you said, how about Frank Lloyd Wright? And I was like, sure, I don't like either of those ideas, so let's do that. So Jimbo, there's a shout out for you.
Thank you, Jimbo.
Yeah, so if any of you have ideas, why don't you email us at unprofessionalengineering@gmail.com.
Subscribe.
That's right, subscribe. What else should they do, Luke?
They should definitely give us a review.
They should give us a review.
5-star review.
At least 5 stars, maybe more.
If they were 6, I'd give them.
Steal your kid's device and give us a review on that too. I'm not, that's.
And we'll send you some
beneath me.
sweet stickers.
Oh, we will send you sweet stickers.
We just need like proof. Isn't how you need proof of purchase when you were a little kid to get like the magic
box
decoder
tops.
rings?
Yeah.
We just need to see that you subscribed and liked, or send some stuff in. And we'll get some stuff out to you.
That's right. All right. So go ahead and do that. So let's go back to the show.
Back to the show.
All right. So you were talking about how he started doing houses on the side.
Yep.
He actually admits that he was still broke because of his, quote, expensive tastes in wardrobe and vehicles and the extra luxuries he designed into his house. So he knew he was blowing money.
Yeah,
but he just didn't seem to be able to control himself. But I thought it was funny how you said, like, the boss caught wind of it. That's because a neighbor of his, like the dude in his development, had a house that was so obviously a Frank Lloyd Wright design that you couldn't deny it, and that then he like called him out on it. And you're right that there's a lot of dispute about, okay, did I get fired? Was there some sort of like agreement that happened here? But what I heard was that the boss basically booted him out in anger and refused to give him the deed to his house because it was on a loan.
Oh.
And then like things happened and the other partner kind of felt bad for him and ended up giving him the deed to the house. So I thought that was interesting.
Can we talk like some bad stuff? I hate disparaging people.
I don't.
Posthumously. Is that the right word? Did I just use that correctly?
I don't know what posthumously.
Because he's dead.
Posthumously?
So Frank wasn't the nicest human being, unfortunately.
Okay. Let's hear about it.
I think he was sometimes with genius there comes madness, James, and maybe that's what it was.
So what you're getting at is he wasn't really into the being married thing.
Yeah, so he and his wife Kitty, they have 6 kids.
6.
Pow, lots of kids.
He basically was not a father.
He was not there at all. But 6 kids. So
what house is the design?
Yeah. So at some point, I think this is in like the early 1900s, like 1909 is what I found. So in 1909, he's like, you know what? I'm Audi 5000.
That's
what
he's like.
I'm pretty sure he said that. That was a phrase back then.
Yeah, he invented that.
He said, I'm out of here. He leaves Kitty and her 6 kids in Chicago.
His 6 kids.
His 6 kids.
They're 6 kids.
They're his kids. He leaves them and hooks up with Mayma Brothwick.
Is that how you say it? I was thinking Mama.
I think it's Mayma.
Mayma.
Mayma Brothwick.
Brothwick Cheney.
She was actually the wife of a client who had 2 kids of
Right?
her own. Who apparently he was having like this affair, and basically there was lots of drama going on. So he and Mayma, they leave and go to Europe for a year.
Now, did you see why they had to go to Europe? She had to go to Europe to be able to claim abandonment
from her
husband to be able to get a divorce, which was interesting.
But Kitty, she never gave him a divorce. For like the longest time.
Yeah.
He never married Mayma.
No,
Ever.
well, I want to get into that, and I don't want you to talk about it. Do you know what I'm going to say?
Yeah, I know what you're probably going to get into.
See, this is what I thought was the best part, and you were like, I don't know what you're talking about. So is there anything that you want to talk about while they were in Europe?
No, it wasn't.
I thought it was
wasn't
kinda
too.
boring.
Yeah, it was kind of boring.
So they come home in like 1911, let's call it, after their stint in Europe and some
they were
book
only there 1 year.
publishing and stuff. Right, wasn't a big deal. And Frank, being basically the worst, like I've been saying, says, "Mommy, will you buy me some land?"
Yeah.
That's literally what happened. "Mommy, buy me some land." And she's like, "All right, Frankie, I love you."
So in the valley.
So yeah, in Spring Green, Wisconsin, they bought this kind of like family land. Again, it was like a commune.
Yep.
So they bought land from her family that was like 600 acres for him to build his house on. Right. And so this was, how do you say it?
Taliesin.
Taliesin, so known as Taliesin East and Taliesin Spring Green or North, depending on like the different pieces of it, I guess. So this is one of his other really famous properties that he's created. But the cool part about all of this, and I use cool as like an interesting thing, is that in 1914, on the fateful day or night of August 15th.
This is terrible.
While Wright is out working in Chicago, Julian Carleton, a male servant from Barbados who had been hired for several months, set a fire to the living quarters in this gig or in this place. And then he went on to murder 7 people with an axe.
Including Mayma and her 2 kids.
Including Mayma, her 2 children, a gardener, a draftsman that worked with him, and another workman's son. 2 people survived the murder, so they escaped the hatchet, apparently, and they helped put out the fire that almost completely burnt down the whole area. The dude that chopped people up with an axe then drank hydrochloric acid right after the attack to try and kill himself, and it didn't work. And so they took him to Dodgeville Jail. Apparently, that's a Wisconsin jail. And the dude ends up dying from starvation 7 weeks later because he couldn't eat with his acid throat, even though he was getting medical attention. How amazing is that? That's the story of Frank Lloyd Wright I need to hear.
I never heard that story before, and when I was doing the research, I was like stunned.
Yeah.
By it. It was kind of crazy.
That was the highlight of all of this for me. I thought that was just amazingly interesting.
That's pretty morbid.
Yeah, I'm sorry. So in 1922, Kitty finally granted Wright a divorce. And so he met Miriam Noel in November of 1923. But unfortunately, her addiction to morphine led to a failure in the marriage, plus him probably kind of being a jerk. In 24, while separated and still married, he met Olga Vana Lazvich Heisenberg. And
she ended up
ballet in Chicago.
Ended up being kind of. She was 30 years his junior.
Good job, Frankie.
Ooh.
Yeah, that's something. 30 years younger.
Crazy.
That really is.
Yeah, he was in his early 60s, I think, when they met, and she was only like 31 or 32, from what I understand.
Yeah. So, what else do you have? I don't want to steal it all.
No. So he and Olga meet. And the way they kind of explain her was she was the one that kind of helped him refocus. Because, after having your wife chopped up and your
well, I don't think it was his wife.
Yeah, his lover.
Mistress,
chopped up and the house burned down. She kind of was able to get him stabilized. And he continued to do relatively small projects up until the point where there was a pretty big crash in the stock market. And when this happened, basically all construction died. I don't have the year exactly, but basically all construction died. And he literally ended up becoming flat broke, like literally zero money, nothing he can do about it. And guess who comes to the rescue, James?
Who?
I love this story.
No, please tell me.
Mr. Kaufman.
Oh, Mr. Kaufman.
From Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
What a generous man he must have been.
So if you've never heard of Kaufman's is it used to be a department store here in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and it was Edgar Kaufman was the gentleman that owned it. They're a big, huge, famous family here in Pittsburgh, all kinds of philanthropy and all that sort of stuff. But he says, hey, I got this cabin that burned down up in Bear Run, which is in eastern PA, roughly, and I want you to rebuild it. And guess what that ended up becoming, James?
I can't even imagine, Luke.
Falling Water.
Falling Water? I've never heard of such a thing.
Falling Water is considered by, I would say, most people, one of the most beautiful residential homes ever created. I've seen it a bunch of times. I love Falling Water, absolutely. And what saved it was, so here's the story. You ready?
I want to hear
Mr. Kaufman calls up the studio and says, hey, I'm going to be there in 2 hours. I want to look at my plans. And Frankie's like, whoa, I didn't know you were coming. He had nothing. In 2 hours, he draws up the basic elevation and floor plan for Falling Water. And instead of putting it in front of the waterfall where they thought he was going to put it, guess where he did it? Smack dab on top of the waterfall. And that is what made Falling Water such a dramatic house.
He said to them, I want you to live with the waterfall, not just look at it.
Yeah.
What a quote.
So that project alone basically saved Frank, or basically, a lot of times they say people like Frank Lloyd Wright, they have kind of 2 chapters to their career. This was the beginning of his 2nd chapter, and it was way bigger than the first.
Yeah, so if you look at the place, go Google an image of
gorgeous.
it. It's really pretty. I'll give it that. It's the setting that's actually beautiful. The house is fine. But
You're the worst.
it's fine. But what's really interesting is that your great architect that you love so much did a total botch job on this thing. Did you see that?
There wasn't a lot of engineering, maybe. He was doing a little more architecting than engineering.
In his great designs, he has this giant cantilevered riverfront thing sagged over, right?
They fixed that.
The moment so there's huge moment like pulling on the concrete, right? Dampness seeping in from the waterfall, flowing underneath it into the cracks and everything. And they tear it open and trying to fix it, mold everywhere.
They stabilized
this house is moldy, broken from the get-go. You're telling me this is like this great architect. His masterpiece is immediately moldy and broken. That's a real claim to fame right there. It is beautiful, though. I'll put that out there. So can we go back to his life just a little bit more?
Yep, shoot.
And then we'll get more into the houses. Before we do, though, let's take another break for this week's Luke's Rant.
So here is my rant, and I'm keeping it related to houses. So not to brag, James, but I'm a landlord.
You are. Your podcast money is doing work for you.
So basically, it's the house I used to live in. It's super cheap. I ended up renting it. Being a landlord is super difficult. So I'm gonna relate this to the recent weather we've had here too. So I tell my people that live there, and any of you that are landlords, I'm sure you maybe deal with this, and maybe you can give me some tips on how to deal with it. I tell them in the lease, hey, you have to take care of the sidewalks. Because if someone slips and falls on the sidewalk, I get in trouble for it. So it snows the other day, right? 2 days later, I go over, sidewalk's covered in snow. So then I go over and I shovel the sidewalk. And it's like, is that really my job to go over and shovel the sidewalk of the house whenever it's in the lease that he's supposed to? So my rant is, if you rent a house that has a sidewalk, just shovel the sidewalk. The last thing you want to do is the guy you're renting off of or the lady you're renting off, you don't want them to get sued because someone slips and falls and, breaks their ankle. And it's just so frustrating. And my wife's like, I told you we never should have rented that house. We should have just sold it. I was like, I shoveled the walkway in 7 minutes, and we shouldn't own a rental property, and that's why. So that's my rant. It's a little personal, but
it was. But I think it's a good statement to make.
Yeah,
stop being
take
jerks.
Take care of your property, people.
That's right.
Sorry.
Other people's property. Take care of that too.
Yes.
All right, so I'm going to just touch base on 2 things. There was a second fire, because apparently fires follow this guy around.
Well, he does a lot of wood.
And somehow, that's true. Somehow he had a bunch of Japanese prints, like a collection of them.
He was in Japan for a while.
Yeah, he loved Japan and Japanese design. They were worth $250,000 to $500,000 back in that time, which is crazy, and they all burnt up, which was unfortunate. So then in 1959, Wright was hospitalized for abdominal pain, and they had an operation, and they're like, he's doing pretty well. And then he died a couple days later. Ugh. So they gave him the old tricky thing going on there. So there was a bunch of turmoil in the life of like his wife, who died, I think fairly shortly after. And then like all of this stuff just started happening with his properties, becoming like either saved properties or museums, and all these foundations showed up. So That's my whole history of his life
Okay,
before we get into the buildings.
Yeah, I want to jump back a little bit. So after he rebuilt Taliesin, so after it burned down, he rebuilt it.
He did.
He actually needed help, so he started this this Frank Lloyd Wright, basically school of architecture, and it really wasn't a school as much. Basically, the way the students explained it was he needed help building this place, and we went there to help him, and he basically told us, if you learn something along the way, great, but I just need help rebuilding this place.
Yeah,
so so basically he starts this fellowship or this school where and again, this whole commune idea is a little weird to me. These students would basically live on the property, and they would basically work on the Taliesin building itself, and they would develop new structures every now and then. Whenever he was and this when business was slow before the Fallingwater thing happened, they would work on different things, and they would help him with his different houses. And apparently, it was super prestigious. Like, people were like dying to get into this. And then Olga one year,
Mama,
is like, "I'm out of here. It's way too cold. We got to scoot." So they basically pack up the entire fellowship, all these people, and they move out to I think it's Arizona. It's out in the west.
He does move to Arizona, Scottsdale maybe.
Yeah, it's called Taliesin West.
Yeah, because real original.
Yeah, and it's still there today, and it's actually a functioning school where architects go to learn and study, and they do all kinds of crazy stuff. But they move out there, so they basically spend the winters in Taliesin West, and then they spend the summers and spring in Taliesin East, North. I'm not sure what it was. I'm not sure if that one technically had a name.
I think he has like 300 structures still standing.
Yeah, so the number I have is he has a total of 425 works that he's actually made. How many are still standing?
Right.
A lot of them have been, demolished. A lot of them are museums that you can go tour through. We have a couple here in.
I think one is, but
in the Pittsburgh
I guess
area.
Yeah. So before you get into the buildings, I want to give you some time to gush over how great they are.
Okay.
But first, I wanted to talk about his influences, and another thing that makes him just the worst. So he strongly believed in individualism, not surprising to anyone, but he did say that he had 5 major influences. Louis Sullivan, so that was kind of his mentor. Nature, obviously, so particular shapes and forms and color patterns that he found. Music. Beethoven was his favorite composer, in case someone didn't know that. I think we all do, though. Japanese art, so prints and buildings. So like I said, he had like 500 smackers worth of prints that got burnt up. And then that Froebel gift that we talked about from when he was a child. Another fun fact about him being just the worst, like the absolute worst, he routinely claimed the work of architects and other designers that were in his employment as his own designs. Took all credit for the creation and plans that were made.
Interesting.
Just basically stole their work because he's the work. But if you go to flwright.org, which I mentioned earlier, there's a whole bunch of cool resources. So I know we have a bit of a STEM following. So anyone out there looking for school programs or online educations or all things about him and his architecture and what inspired him and maybe what would make something one type of design versus another. What was it, like prairie homes or something? Yeah. Prairie houses, things like that. You can go to flwright.org and learn all about it. So let's talk about some of his essential works, Luke.
So I have a game before we do that. Or do you want to save the game for the end?
Let's do the game.
Okay, so the Ennis House in Los Angeles, California.
Okay.
This was 1923.
Okay.
And this was the one that was made with basically these super stylized cinder blocks. I want you to name 2 movies that house was in.
Well, I don't even know what the house looks like, so I guess I can't really play this game. Do you have a picture of it for me?
I do, but it's more difficult.
All right. Could you tell me 2 movies that some random house was in?
Blade Runner.
Next.
Harrison Ford. There's a scene where he's
in Blade Runner, not new
the old
Runner?
Blade Runner. Yeah, Harrison Ford. And The Karate Kid.
Ooh.
2 or 3. I'm not sure which one it was in.
Exciting.
Yeah, it wasn't in the original one. So yeah, it was used. And actually, a lot of his houses are used in lots and lots of different movies. But that is probably the one that's been used the most. It's super like futuristic looking. Yeah, that's my game. It was quick.
That was a good game. Thanks. It'd do better if I knew what it looked like. Okay. I still would have not gotten.
No, you wouldn't have Blade Runner and Karate Kid.
Did you see Kentucky Knob?
Oh, Kentucky Knob's amazing.
See, so have you been to these houses?
I've been to Kentucky Knob, Fallingwater, and I've been to 2 of his in the Chicago area.
Fallingwater just seems just far enough away to be inconvenient to go to.
But Kentucky Knob and Fallingwater are closer, are like 30 minutes away from each other. So if you go to one, it's easy to get to the other.
Yeah. It's right on the, what is it, the Yagagani River Gorge?
Oh my goodness, Yakagani.
Yakagani? There's no ach in there, though. Yakagani. Yeah. So apparently I thought it was in Kentucky, but it turns out it's in Pennsylvania as well. Who knew?
The Kentucky Knob is in Kentucky.
Because why would that be the case, right?
I don't know.
So what else do you have to talk about that are nice?
So a couple big ones. Obviously, Fallingwater. Probably the other most recognizable, other than Fallingwater, is the Guggenheim.
Yeah, it's stupid and ugly too.
Yeah, so basically he hated New York City. He basically said
him.
These are glass boxes and everything you're building is rubbish. So when he got the opportunity to build the Guggenheim, it was basically, you know what, I'm going to make something that is completely the opposite of everything here. So that's where the Guggenheim's kind of design inspiration came from, being all circular.
All circular. And did you see how people are angry? Like, how are we supposed to be able to hang paintings on these walls?
Yeah.
And he is like, screw paintings, like break them in half.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, it's like they're there to see my building.
Yeah.
So the Guggenheim is another super famous one. The other one is, I think it's the S.C. Johnson office building. So this was one right after Fallingwater commissioned, and it's noted as the most beautiful room in like all architectural kind of history. It's this enormous 3-story tall room. It's an office building, and they have these super skinny pillars that kind of turn into mushrooms at the top, and there's skylights, and it's like breathtaking. I've never seen it personally, but I saw the pictures, and it's absolutely amazing. So that one, the Guggenheim, Fallingwater. There's a few churches he did that are super famous. A convention center out in San Rafael, California, he did. So yeah, lots and lots of amazing buildings. Just check them out. 425. There's probably one near you.
Okay, so the one I wanted to bring up, which is not near anyone anymore, is the Imperial Hotel in Tokyo.
Pretty amazing.
So he built this thing. It was apparently like this giant hotel, which was actually inspired not only by Japanese design, but also his interest in Mayan design at the time. If you're interested in Mayan design, check out our episode on how the Mayans influenced technology.
See what you did there.
Yeah, but it was like a system of gardens, sunken gardens, terraced gardens, all sorts of balconies. It was actually really cool looking. I'll say this one was pretty okay. Neat thing about this is, again, he's pretty much the worst. And this building was kind of built on a little marshy land, and it was sinking. And then it continued to sink. And then after it sunk a little more, it sunk even further. And so they were like, you know what we're going to do is blow this sucker up because it's sinking into the ground and we can't use it anymore. But a cool thing about that is the first female Japanese architect worked on it with him and then joined him like at his firm working afterwards.
That's
So
cool.
that's pretty cool, right?
Very cool.
So do you have anything else about your boy, Frank Lloyd Wright?
No,
Frank Lincoln Wright.
I like him. I like what he does. The whole personal stuff, and we found this a couple times with the people we've done. We don't like them as much as a person as we do like what they did or what they.
Maybe we just assume they're great people as well, but they have issues too.
Yeah,
That's too bad. Well, if you people liked the Amazing Architects episode that we did, let us know. Email us or whatever, and maybe we'll do more of them. What do you think, Luke?
I think so. And then we'll do one on amazing civil engineers. Sorry.
All right. Well, until next time.
See ya.